Think about the way that you learn vocabulary right now. Do you learn a term in isolation by getting a random list from somebody, or you go and find a set of words? Or do you find words in your reading and you're listening? You're listening to one thing, you're reading one thing, and you pick up words in that context. How you study vocabulary really matters for fluency.
Let's talk about it. What's up, guys, and welcome back to WaiGuo Friends English. Over the past few videos, we've been talking a lot about vocabulary building, and because it's extremely important, it is what largely determines whether or not you can understand the world around you. But the question is how do you streamline that process? How do you acquire these vocabulary terms? What is the methodology that you're using? Because depending on what kind of method you're using will depend on how efficient that process actually is. The common strategy that a lot of people use is they find this word in a particular context, they look that word up, they find a definition that fits that context, and then they just say, no, that's what that word means. That's the definition. I found the definition. It was like I was searching through a bin of toys and I found the toy, and so now I have it. I'm moving on. That's what that word means. And that is helpful for you to be able to easily smash out hundreds of words because it's just a one-to-one thing. It's easy to realize that dog means dog if you just realize that it means dog.
As a beginner or intermediate, that looks like look up the meaning, write it down, practice writing sentences with it, and try to use it throughout the day, which is great to start and it's great to do a lot of things, but it gives you a very linear understanding of that word. It's one context to remind you of that word. With this strategy, we tend to learn a lot of words, and so then you're trying to keep your eye out for a lot of different words at the same time, and it's just easy to forget. It sets you up to kind of forget that word, unless it's something that you do come across all the time in your daily English. But how often does that happen as an advanced learner? How often is it that you come across a word that you didn't know already, like an intermediate or beginner word, and that you are going to see so much that you're just going to be able to add it to your active vocabulary without really trying? That doesn't exist anymore at the advanced level. So we're talking about how to take that vocabulary, elevate it up to fluency, get to the point where you are actively remembering words that you haven't quite added to your active vocabulary yet, but should be there if you are going to be a fluent speaker.
So instead of having that linear progression of that word where you have to have the context, that very specific context in order to remember that word, how fluent speakers and how native speakers view language is that it's intentionally tied to other things. It's tied to other contexts, it's tied to other words, it's tied to other synonyms, and so that's what you have to do is you have to switch from that, here's a word, here's a context, here's a word, here's a context, here's a word, here's a definition. You have to switch from that to say words are more complicated than that. There are multiple contexts that this word can be in. On this channel, we do phrasal verbs by context, but if you notice, we do not just stay in that one context bubble. We say this word is actually a really big word and it means this in that context, it means this in this context. It kind of branches out. It has an umbrella effect over various contexts. So it's good to have those broad groupings of context that you can look for and you can have familiarity with those words, but you also need to have this touching base with other contexts because that's how native speakers really make connections. They make connections with experiences, with backgrounds, with synonyms, with antonym, with pictures, with sounds, with body language, with intonation, with feelings that they've had, with that history of that word. There's so much that they do and it's all connected together, and that makes that word extremely strong.
And it's difficult, right? A dictionary tells you the definition of this word, but it can't tell you the feeling. It can't tell you the nuances that are carried with that word. So how do you get that? If you are aiming for fluency, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to study American history to a T or anything like that. It certainly helps because we all learned American history, but you don't have to have all of that to really become fluent, but you do need to have some of it. You don't have to study all of the roots and meanings and getting down into the origins of the word. It helps, but you don't absolutely have to do that. But if you take it and you just start talking with somebody and just say, hey, when would you use this word instead of this synonym? It's difficult for me to see the difference here. And we've talked about this before in another video where we're talking about just range of meaning or all these words that have very similar definitions and which ones we would use it in, like glisten versus glimmer. You can find that up here in this video. But if you want to get to where you write very well in English or you speak very well in English or you're wanting to connect far more deeply and express yourself more fully in English and your fluency is your aim, well, this is some of the stuff that you need to know.
So all that you just said, native speakers, we do this subconsciously. We don't intentionally build these synonym network webs in our mind. It's just what happens naturally. And non-native speakers can do similar things by tying these words and their culture to their own backgrounds, but also the background they're starting to learn here in America. We did the same thing when we were living abroad. We were able to see that there are some words here that are tied to other areas much more deeply than a word like dog.
Some things like sparked feelings that we didn't expect when we used them, or we're like, educate me, please. I need to know this because I don't want to make that mistake again, or I don't want to make you feel bad, or I don't want to make you feel like I'm flirting with you when I'm not. Like, there's a lot of nuances there that you don't know just learning from definitions.
If you're an advanced or a functionally fluent English speaker who wants to be even more fluent, then you've got to build connection. You've got to practice natural English in natural English speaking contexts, because the more connections you have, the better you will know that word.
Let's give an example here. What does that look like? I'm going to choose the word strain because it came up recently with a student that is aiming for this kind of fluency. And he was like, I have no idea what this word means in this context. I know what strain means, but I don't know what it means in this context. And I was like, well, let's unpack it. It has so many meanings, guys. It's a verb and a noun. You have to force oneself to make a strenuous effort. Like, you are forcing yourself almost to the point of where you're injuring yourself to do something, okay? Whether this is exercising, something that you're bench pressing, something way too heavy, and it causes you to strain really hard. It can also mean to push or pull something very forcibly, to strain at something, like you're working really hard to move this giant crate across the floor. It can also mean to make excessive demands on someone or something. Like, you can push your vehicle to its limits. You are straining that vehicle. You can also push a person to their limits. You can strain the relationship. You can strain that person. You can also use it to pour a liquid through a strainer to catch like the particles and let the liquid go like more cleanly into the bin underneath it. So that's to strain something. We use that all the time in the kitchen. As a noun, it means a force that pulls or pushes something with an extreme degree. So like the noun form of to strain at something. Okay, that was a strain on you. It was a strain on me. We can use it in a relationship sense too. When you say that to me, it is a strain to me, okay? It pushes me beyond what I normally do or what I can normally expect. It can also be an injury to the part of the body, not to be confused with sprain. You have strain and you have sprain. By straining something, that means you have really worked something, you've nearly injured yourself. A sprain is the actual injury, okay? It's particularly to a joint or to a tendon. You can strain yourself to the point that you get a sprain. We can also use as a noun to name the excessive demand that you put on somebody or something, whether it's a duty, something that's way beyond what somebody should have to do, or whether it's the thing itself, the problem that strains a relationship. It could also be a state of tension or exhaustion resulting from those severe demands. So you could just say, like, I have a strain right now. I have a strain on my schedule. Finally, it could also be the sound of a piece of music as it is played. Like, you have strains in music. So totally unrelated to the rest of it. There's so many things to unpack with this word.
So as an advanced speaker, now you've looked up and determined the right meaning for the right context. This is the definition that it applies here. So you're obviously going to be able to use the word all the time, right?
Not quite.
Something that will help you in this case is to help you learn the different synonyms that can apply in those different situations. So instead of just saying, this is what strain is, it is a musical term. I now know that strain is a musical term, so now I'm done. You start to learn these synonyms so that your brain can have something more to grasp onto it instead of just strain, 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 strain. 4 different strains, 4 different contexts. That's way too difficult for a brain to distinguish between these 4 areas. It's too complex. So instead, get some synonyms going for each of these definitions, each of these contexts that you can uncover and really cling to so that you're not confused when you're saying, oh, which strain are we talking about here?
The cool thing is the more consistently you go with this, the more these words will connect, and you'll be able to look for a common synonym that you know already.
What you can do is learn the synonyms for strain, listen for them in your daily life. Look up examples of it online and practice writing with it. Try to get feedback from somebody around you. Try to actually use all the context that you find as you interact with the word like strain or another word in the various contexts of life.
By the way, if you're striving for English fluency, having that native friend is so helpful because you can ask these questions and you can get real answers from somebody that the dictionary can't help. Otherwise, you're looking online and you're looking through forums, you're looking for YouTube videos, you're looking for anybody who has taken the time to actually invest in talking about these words and giving all this background information for you to sink memory hooks into. If you are looking for something like that, we actually already do it at Fluency Fast Track. We have courses all about building this, walking you through a book, and just talking about these vocabulary synonyms. We have recordings on there of us talking about all the different background connections and things that will help you remember these and to help you understand them the way that we do. If you are interested in that, you can find the link in the description.
One thing's for sure. If you don't use it, you're definitely not going to make those connections. You have to actively use something to tell your brain, this is going to stay. This is going to stay here. We got to use it. We got to learn it. We got to memorize it because I'm using it right now. It's actually being produced. It's writing it. It's using it. It's speaking it. So you can't just create connections with words just by learning them. You're not going to be able to build a very efficient spider web of synonyms and how vocabulary is actually connected together just by learning it and sitting there and writing out flashcards and doing a whole wall map of vocabulary. That's not going to help unless you actually start using these in different contexts.
And the way that you know that you're using them properly is if somebody's giving you feedback on it. You need somebody to just be brutally honest with you and say, you know, we don't use the word that way because it feels like this or because it sounds like this. This is better. You need somebody to just sit there and just tell you these things, especially if you're advanced and you're trying to get to fluent. Yes, you can do it on your own. Yes, you can do all that work on your own by yourself, trying to do that. But if you have feedback, it's so much more efficient.
Writing this in a daily journal or a regular exercise, talking with your friends, just kind of bringing it out. Don't let it sit there. We've had so many students look at us and say, I've forgotten so many of my words. I've forgotten so many of my idioms. And it's because they don't have the context in order to use those words, in order to use those idioms. They don't have the means, they don't have the environment, so they just don't. We recognize it's very hard to fabricate that by yourself, living in another country where they don't speak the target language that you're going for. We recognize that, so you have to create that. You have to create that opportunity, even if that's just recordings with yourself, or even if that's just a daily journal that you do at the end of the day. You have to have a means for you to actually use it, for it to actually stick.
The final tip we have for you today is to slow down. Everybody wants to do 50 words a week, 100 words in a week. Yes, you can, but that is a beginner intermediate thing for just getting words. Once you become advanced, you've got to learn the nuances behind those words, some of the nuances. We're not saying you have to be fluent and perfect and have native-like understanding of these terms, but if you want to get to where you can speak fairly flawlessly or fairly fluently, you need to be able to understand some of what we feel when you say these words. You need to understand which words are hot topics, which words are offensive, which words are actually very good to use, which ones feel weird in certain contexts versus others. Those are all important things to understand about these terms. And you're only going to get an understanding like that if you slow down. Slow way down. Like 1 to 5 words a week, guys. That's what I'm talking about. At least bring it back to 5 words a week. Yes, if you have hours and hours and hours every single day to really study and you've got native speakers, you live there and you're working on it all the time, you can do more words. But our minds work best when we go deep with just a few words. And so if you are a busy person, you are an adult, you have a family, you are working, whatever it is, you are studying in university, wherever it is that you are, you've just got to slow down. I know 5 words a week is not that much, but that's 20 words a month, and that's 240 words a year. That's actually substantial. For adding 240 words that you can actively use and engage with people and you have really deep roots with them, that's amazing. And it's not just that, you're going to be going over the synonyms anyway. It's not like you're going to be really focusing on those synonyms, but you're going to be tying words together and you're going to be making a synonym network. So all of that is really helpful. It's not like you're isolating yourself to just 5 words a week. You're really focusing on 5 words a week is the idea.
So adding that vocabulary will help you express yourself better. But just adding just bonus vocabulary, just throwing words into the machine's not going to make it more efficient. What we have to do is we have to slow down. We have to tie it together with other things so that we can be able to then use it. I think about it in terms of like my high school math problems. I got so excited when my teacher would say, hey, for your homework, you only have 5 questions. But each of those questions had A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There was many parts to that one question. And it's because all those questions after it are related to that problem. And so by the end of those 5 problems, even though there were actually more like 20 or 40 questions, I knew the problems very well, and I knew what the teacher was trying to say. I knew the context. I could apply those things into other contexts. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about in this video. That's the kind of thing that we want you to be able to have confidence in. Those 5 words, we're not just talking about 5 words. We're talking about 5 words, and each word may have 6 definitions, and then you have 6 different contexts, and then you have 6 different sets of synonyms that you have to learn. We hope that that's the kind of knowledge that you can just bring to the table when you are talking to a native speaker. So when they bring up programming, you don't have to pull up your programming notebook to be like, oh, let me turn to that page. These are the words we're talking about right now. You can say, I can actually use other words and other contexts in this conversation right now.
All right, guys, that's it for us today. And to give you guys something a little bit more tangible, we're going to do a video next week talking about an advanced vocabulary study routine. And it's something that's going to help you organize those words. It's going to help you walk through those words and make sure you're checking off all the different things. It's going to be totally doable if you've got 10, 15, 30 minutes a day. So we are excited to bring that out to you next week. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.